So, here was Bill, the youngest member of the Arciprete family. Probably remembers the least about the early days of the Arciprete clan. What do you remember? What are your earliest recollections of New York City? Or
my earliest recollections were living on Cherry Street in a tenement house. We had two apartments. One was up on I think on the fourth floor, and one was on the first floor. I don't recall how big these apartments were, but they were two apartments, and there were walk-ups. I remember my brother Joe, one day I hurt my knee, and he was carrying me up the stairs. I must have been about 4, I guess, at the time. He was carrying me up the stairs, but that was about the earliest recollections I have of that area. And then we moved to Connecticut, basically. I don't remember too much of New York. I was very young when we moved away from there.
how much of Connecticut do you remember? It was Westport?
Very little. I really don't remember how long we lived there, but it was less than 6 months, because I don't remember going through the grade in school. At that time, it was every 6 months you'd get promoted into the next grade, and but I don't remember going from one grade to another. So it must have been less than 6 months we lived in Westport, and then we moved back into Long Island City.
To Astoria.
Well, it was Long Island City. We later on, we moved to Astoria. Originally, we were in Long Island City. That was the first house we had there.
Well, all right, let's start with your father. What do you remember your earliest memories of your father?
The earliest memory I have of him is at Cherry Street. He was laying a carpet down, and it was a checkerboard carpet, big, about a foot square checkerboard, and there was a square missing, and he told me to put that square in, and I must have hammered about 50 nails into it. And he never said a word to me. He patted me on the back. He said, "Good job," But I remember I banged it. Oh boy, it must have been at least 50 nails into it. And he never said a word to me. I think back about that a lot of times now, and I just amazing the patience he must have had with me. But that was the earliest I remember of him. At that point, we didn't. When we moved to Connecticut, I didn't get to see him that much, because he stayed in Long Island City. He worked there. And then afterwards, when we moved to Long Island City, he, but they worked long hours in those days. He'd leave before I got up in the morning, and he'd come back home, supper time. He'd be tired. And I really didn't get to see him that much. Probably not as much as children see their fathers today. It's a little different today. Yeah.
What about your mother?
Well, she was
a tough bird, huh?
No, I can't say that, because I was the last, and I guess I was treated with kid gloves. She always treated me. I guess she knew I was going to be her last one, and I was always pretty well pampered. When I think back of the my older brothers and sisters, they had a little tougher than I did. I guess I got away with a lot more than they did. She was tough on them. I know she was tough on them. She'd make them toe the line, you know. But I got, not that I got away with more. She was more. She probably, I guess, she babied me more than she did them, because she didn't have the time for them. That, you know, because they were, you know, she had them pretty close together. Whereas with me, she probably had a little bit more time for me. And I was baby. There's no doubt about it.
What's the age difference between you and Ernie?
I'm 3 years younger than he is. Yeah.
So were you two kind of, would you say Joe and Tony hung out, and then you and Ernie?
Ernie and I really never hung out together, and I don't really know why, but he had a different, well, you know, when you're growing up, 3 years is a big difference. You know, you're talking about a 12-year-old and a 15-year-old, and a 15-year-old and an 18-year-old. You know, there's a big difference there. Or a 7-year-old and a 10-year-old. And he had a different set of friends than I had, basically. There were, I guess, he met his friends in school, you know, and I did too, you know. And there were different neighborhoods, but you're talking about maybe I hung out with guys 2 blocks away from where I lived, or a block, and he hung out with guys maybe 3 blocks away, you know, so it wasn't that far. But we really never hung out together. I always remember he was a good ball player, good baseball player. I remember he had, his number was 00 on his, I think it was his football jersey. I don't know if it was football jersey or his baseball jersey. And that's the number I chose when I got my number. You know, I always looked up to him. He was a good brother. There's no doubt.
Remember his baseball number?
I think 00 was his football number.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I really can't say I remember his baseball number. You know, it's.
So, but let's say there's something happened in the neighborhood or something. Somebody was pushing you around. Was it?
Oh yeah,
Ernie?
no.
Was it Joe? Was it Tony? Well,
No, well, Joe and Tony were
a lot older.
By the time I was 10, Tony was married, so he wasn't even in the neighborhood anymore. Joe was a little bit younger, but I really didn't. It was the closest one I had was Ernie. Although not that Joe, I wasn't close to Joe and Tony. I was, but I didn't see them as often. You know, they were older. They'd be going out on dates by then. You know, whereas Ernie and I, we'd be home. We were still young. But, you know, Joe would be going out on dates, and Tony was just about married by that time, basically. So, but Ernie was the one I was closest to, because he was closest to my age, you know, basically. And my sisters, I really didn't see that much. Angie used to take care of me as a baby, she tells me. But of course she got married. I was just a kid when she got married, and I was fairly young when they got married. You know, they all got married basically, you know. And then the war started, and they were, my 3 brothers were in the army, and I was the only one left. So you got about 2 or 3 years that I hardly got to see them. You know, they were gone in the army, or the Navy. They were in 2 in the Navy, 1 in the army. Yeah.
What's the story about when you guys moved and then Ernie came back from the army?
Yeah, well, that's when we.
Hold on. Let me ask that question again.
That's when we went.
Hold on. Tell me the story about when you guys moved and Ernie came back from the army.
Yeah, well, we moved from Long Island City to Astoria, and I was in high school at the time, and evidently no one. He was in the army. I think he was in Maryland at the time, in the Navy. I'm sorry, he was in the Navy. And nobody informed them that we were moving for whatever reason. I mean, I don't know. I was, probably about 15, 16 years old, and I didn't think about it at the time. And nobody thought about it. And he came home, and the house was empty. I mean, to this day, I don't know how we found out where we moved to. Luckily, it wasn't too far.
Well, was he mad?
Well, I really don't remember. I may not have been home at the time when he got there. I really don't remember I probably wasn't even home at the time when he got home and asked what happened. I don't think he was mad, though. It was just one of those things that happened. Yeah.
When you were in the army, were you in the army?
Yeah.
This was after the war.
Yeah.
You went to Italy?
Yeah. Well, I was stationed in Germany, and I took a furlough in Italy.
Where did you go to in Italy?
Well, we went to a few different places, but I had some relatives in the town of Pozzuoli. It's
How do you spell that?
Pouzzolio, I believe that's the way it's spelled. I'm not sure, but it's a little town right outside of Naples. It's basically a suburb of Naples. What it is, and I had some relatives there. I had some relatives in Florence. I was up there too.
Well, who are these relatives?
I had an uncle in Pozzuoli. There was my mother's brother.
Okay.
And I had...
You'd never met this man before?
No. And there was her sister. She lived there too. But she lived in a convent. She was fairly old at the time. She was probably 75, 80 years old at the time. But she lived in a convent. She used to work for the nuns in a convent. She'd do house cleaning for her, but she lived there too. And I met her once, and my uncle, I stayed at his house a couple of days, and I met his children, which were my cousins.
They were Arcipretes or
No,
Fortunas?
they were Fortunas. Their name was Fortuna. There weren't any Arcipretes. There was an Arciprete that lived in Naples, but I never had. It was my father's sister. She wasn't an Arciprete at the time, but she was. But I never, for whatever reason, I didn't have her address when I got to Italy, and I couldn't get to see her. I didn't get to see her, and the person I went to see in Florence was a cousin. I really don't know how he was related. He was a cousin to my father. Now, I'm not quite sure how he was related. Where he must have been a son of one of my father's sisters. No, that would have made him. but his name wasn't, he wasn't an Arciprete, his Rinaldi, his name. So he had to be on the female side where the name changed, but he was a cousin of my father's, so a first cousin, so it had to be somewhere in there.
What was the town that Grandma came from, and then what was the town?
Patsuli, that's where.
Did you see her old house or anything
Yeah,
like that?
yeah, in fact, I stayed at the, well, no, I'm sorry. It wasn't the house that, I saw the house that my mother and father lived in when they first got married, but I didn't go into it. The house I stayed in was not the house that she grew up in, so I really don't know where she grew up, what house that was.
Well, what about the house that Angie, Tessie, and Margie have all told me that?
Well, that,
your mother cried for a year because she left the house with tile floors.
I never got into that house. I saw her from the outside. Yeah, saw her from the outside. They were, I'm trying to think now, they were basically about three-story buildings with outside staircases, from what I recall. They're nice old buildings. They were fairly old, but they were nice because they had a lot of tile and marble. It wasn't something like wood that rotted, There was a lot of stone and tile and marble, so it could be ages old, and it doesn't change that much. The thing,
So then you get out of the army, and did you go to college, or where did you go?
No. I met your Aunt Mary before I went in the army, his mother. And when I came back from the army, before I went into the army, I had taken the police officer's test, New York City police officer's test. And when I got out of the army about 6 months later, about 2 months after I got out of the army, we got married because she was living in North Carolina and I was in New York.
How did you meet Mary?
We both had a job in the department store is out of business now. It was called Franklin Simon. It was a Christmas job. At that time, all the department stores would hire extra help at Christmas time, and I got a job there. And she was going to a school at the time, college. No, it was a business college that required that they do a certain amount of work in department stores at Christmas time. That she happened to be working there, and that's where I met her, basically. So in other words, we corresponded all through my 2 years in the army. I saw her. I went down to Virginia, did my basic training down there, and she had gone home to North Carolina, so I got to see her a little bit. And then I went to Germany for a year. When I got back, she was in North Carolina, and it was a case of, it's a long-distance commuting. So we got married, and never regretted it. And basically, that's. And I went in the police department after that. After we got married, and put in 20 years there.
What was Grandma's response to you not marrying an Italian girl?
Not too happy. Well, she was from the old school. Catholics marry Catholics, and she was a little upset that Mary wasn't Catholic. It's just something she really didn't. It was very hard for her to accept this. But listen, I'm sure in time she did. She had to. She didn't have any choice, basically, you know. But it was something that she always thought that, you know, Protestants marry Protestants and Catholics marry Catholics. This is the way she was brought up. You know. But
Were you married Catholic?
no, we married in Mary's Church, Methodist Church in North Carolina, basically. And
Okay. Now this is the question. This is all right. This is the question I wanted to ask you. Was when well, I guess it was Dawn when Dawn was born. The story about now this is a story that Angie told me. I don't know if she knows that you told me this. I don't even know if you might even not or know this. She told me that when one of your children was born, that Grandma sent her and Tony, maybe, or Joe, to be sure that the child was baptized.
it's possible. Yeah, it's possible. It was probably Dawn. Yeah, it was possible.
I think it was Dawn.
Yeah, well, all the kids were baptized in the Catholic Church. That doesn't make them any Catholic today. I mean, they all do their own thing. So, no, but they were all baptized in the Catholic Church. This is.
But you had to promise Grandma that you would baptize her.
Well, yeah. Well, I don't recall ever promising her. I said that I would. She asked me if I would, and I said, yeah, I would. I don't ever recall having she asking me to promise her, but she asked me about it once, and I said, yeah, I would. Well, the Methodists don't have baptismals. You know, I don't think they do anyhow. I may be getting in trouble. I don't think they have baptismals, but maybe they might. But I think they join a church at a certain age. That's how they, and then they get they baptize them into the church.
Adults, yeah.
Yeah.
Let's go on to the police department. You did what, 20 years as a policeman?
Yeah, a little more, about 21. Yeah, about 21 years.
Well, how old were you when you joined the police department?
I was 24.
So you're 44.
It was,
let's say,
I think it was 45,
47.
45 when I retired.
You're a young man, and then you do what? You collect your pension?
Well, I had a pension, and I went into with Aunt Mary, we more or less got into the antique business.
How did you get into that? What made you get into it?
Well, she got into it. She always liked old furniture and she'd go around years ago to sell. Well, half of our house is furnished with furniture from the Salvation Army that we refinished. And then after I retired, you know, we started doing shows, antique shows, on a small scale, you know, just locally. And then it was a case of, you know, the pension wasn't enough to retire on. So I had to either go out and work another job or, you know, do this as a sideline and, you know, have an income. And basically that's why it evolved. It was just an added income, the antique business, you know. But she's the brains in it. She's the one that does most of the buying. And, you know, I go along, I pack the van, unload it, you know, and do a little bit, but she's the brains.
You travel all over the country, really, right?
Well, we stay mostly on the East Coast.
Yeah, but basically. Up and down.
Yeah, up and down, basically.
And you load up your van and the trailer and you sleep in
the
trailer.
we have the van, we load that up with the merchandise, and we have the camper. We pull that. And wherever we go, if a lot of times we'll pull right into the field where we're doing the show and set it up there. Or if sometimes we can't, we'll pull into a campground and stay there, and then bring the van over to do the show.
So it's worked out well.
Yeah, it's worked out good. I like it because I have my freedom. You know, if I want a week off, I don't have to do a show. If I want a month off, I don't have to do shows. So I can come and go as I please. I can make my own hours, and I can travel. In other words, if I decide this winter, let's go do some shows down in Florida. Well, it's a nice little vacation. Plus, I do some shows, make some money. You know, so I can come and go as I please, basically, as much as I can.
You do a lot of the fixing and refurbishing yourself.
I used to do a lot more. I don't do that much with furniture anymore. It's a lot of work. It's you're fooling with the paint removers and all. I basically stay with the old painted furniture where it just has to be washed and waxed. Basically, it's once you get into the varnished furniture, a lot of it has to be stripped and all.
What I'm really getting at is you're good with your hands. And the question is I know my father Ernie is very good with his hands. I'm told that Joe was good with his hands. Tony maybe not.
Yeah.
I know obviously your father. So do you think that by watching your father and your brothers?
Well, my father was a machinist, basically. He wasn't much of a carpenter to speak of. I don't know how I got interested in carpentry. A friend of mine, I grew up with him. His father was a carpenter, and he was a very good carpenter himself. And one day I was talking to him, and the house I lived in Astoria didn't have any closets in. My room didn't have any closets. And I was saying to him I wanted to build a closet. And he came over to the house one day and he showed me how to, and we did a whole wall with closets, drawers, and a place for the bed. And it really was, at that time it was made out of knotty pine. It really came out nice. It was my first time I ever fooled with carpentry. I mean, he was showing me how to do everything, you know. I did it all because he didn't have the time to, but he'd tell me, you do this, you do that, you know. And that was my first taste of carpentry, basically. But I'm sure it came from my father in that he was good with his hands, with the machine work. So it had to be inborn. You just don't pick this stuff up out of the thin air, you know, basically. And Ernie, he picked it up. Joe picked it up. Tony, I think what it was with him, he never had to. He didn't have his own house, per se. He lived with his in-laws, so he didn't have to, you know, tear things down and rebuild it, whereas the three of us, we had our own houses, so nobody else is going to do the work for you. You had to, you know, do it yourself, basically.
What would you say to future generation Arcipretes about how would you like them to remember your parents, Carlo and Vincenzo?
Well, you know, I've often discussed with Mary, my wife, about pioneers who came over in the 1700s, who even in the 1800s, who moved west, and the immigrants that came over from Europe, and we disagree. I mean, she seemed to think that the people that moved west, that settled out west, had a, not out west, Midwest, basically, had a tougher time of it than the immigrants that came over. And I tell you, the more I think about it, the people that came over, the immigrants that came over to this country, when my parents came over, and a little before, a little after, they left their home, and they knew, chances are, they'd never see their family again. In other words, there were no planes at the time, ships were very expensive, there wasn't that much money around, so they knew that chances are they were never going to see their parents or their family again. And I tell you, that's a tough thing. When you think about it, if you had to make that decision today, where you'd say, well, I'm going to go here, but I'm not going to see my family again, what kind of a decision is that to me? That's a tough decision to make, and they made it. I don't know why they made it. I guess times were that tough for them, where they came from, that they just... But they didn't have any picnic here, from what I'm told. They had a tough time of it here. A lot of these tenements that they came in, they were cockroach infested, and also I give them. I think they deserve a lot more credit than they've been given. They really, when you leave your home and not knowing where you're going, what it's going to be like, and your chances are not coming back again, that's a tough decision to make, and they made it. I honestly don't know whether I could make that decision. I honestly couldn't say to you if. This is why I say things must have been very desperate for them. That they didn't have that much choice, because as I live today, in other words, there's no way I'd make a decision like that, leave, because I don't have to. But maybe it was a case where they had to, and grateful for it, basically. But it was a tough decision. I'm sure they always wanted to get back, but for whatever reason they never got back. It would have been nice to, take them back. But they weren't that young when they came. That was the whole thing. They were, I think, I guess my father was in his 40s by the time he came. So it was a case. By the time they got established, get a little money together, it was hard. Plus, he still had young children here. I mean, you just can't go back. What do you do with the young children? You can't take everybody back. So it was hard. They deserve a lot of credit for what they did.
Good.